I call to order the Oswego Community Unit School District 308 Board of Education meeting. Can I have a roll call?
Mrs. Doyle?
Present.
Mr. Gatewood?
Present.
Mrs. Johnson?
Present.
Mrs. Kroner? Dr. Marino?
Present.
Mrs. Simonton?
Present.
Mrs. Swanson?
Present.
Agenda item 3.2, Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 4.1, public comment. On behalf of the Board of Education, I would like to thank the public for attending tonight's meeting. We value the feedback we receive from our residents and encourage everyone to take an active interest in their public school system. Residents interested in speaking to the board this evening are asked to have completed a comment card and presented it to the secretary to the board. When the secretary calls your name, I ask that you come to the microphone, state your name for the public record, and provide your feedback. Please note that comments are limited to 5 minutes per person and that no discussion of personnel matters or responses to questions are permitted. We'll limit the comments to 3 per subject. The board does not participate in discussion during public comment. Follow-up to your questions or concerns will be addressed by administration through the contact information provided on the comment card.
Cindy Rook submitted a comment by email.
Okay. Will the COVID-19 vaccine be required for students in order for them to attend in-person school in the fall? If this has not yet been decided, can you direct concerned parents to the governing body who is responsible for making this decision so they can have their concerns heard before a decision is made? Thank you.
Crystal Caspar?
My name is Crystal Caspar, and my son's a freshman at OE. Tonight I came here to speak on behalf of my own family and thousands of parents who couldn't be here. I will never stop fighting for our children and will continue to be vocal until we are finally heard. With the new board president, I'd like to make a statement so it's loud and clear from the start. The district has failed our children. Parents should not have to beg and plead to simply have their children attend in-person instruction. Children belong in the classroom 5 full days a week. I understand there was a pandemic that forced us to shut down, but the shutdown should have been temporary. Instead, it turned into losing most of the year. When the updated guidelines from the ISBE came out in March that loosened restrictions, we finally had a glimmer of hope. Many emails were written to the board and Dr. Sparlin hoping our kids could have gotten more in-person learning, but we were quickly shut down by the board and told no more changes. This has left us wondering if there really was ever a plan to reopen the schools. While other schools seem to quickly adapt to the new changes and guidelines, SD308 did nothing and continued to fail our children. I'm sure you're all aware of current news regarding local teachers unions fighting to keep schools closed. I certainly hope this isn't the case with our district. Unfortunately, with the current in-person instruction that is being offered to our children, in my opinion, this remains a questionable subject. It is our hope that the new board address these issues and work to restore the trust of the community. All we ask is simply to show us that you care about our children and we will do the best for them. We pay some of the highest real estate taxes in the state of Illinois, yet our district is dangerously underfunded. There have been an extreme mismanagement of money in the district and it continues to negatively impact our children. While raises are being dished out, programs and services are being cut. After reviewing the audited 2019 and 2020 financials myself, because I'm an accountant, it has come to my attention that we are over budget on salaries alone by $7 million. The outcome is grim if we continue to pay for things we can't afford. I encourage all parents of SD308 to get more involved. It is past time the board and school district are held accountable for their actions. We demand transparency and honest discussions in order to address these situations and fix this horrible mess. My son told me last night that he wanted to finish the year remotely because school is not fun. I asked him why, and he said, no one talks to each other. You can't hear people speak in class because of the mask. He said it's no different than being home because they are literally sitting at their desk in school on their Chromebook, interacting with people that way. What is the point of being in school if this is how it's going to be? We are doing so much damage to our children's social and emotional health. They need to interact with peers. I honestly miss seeing them smile and laugh, giving hugs, high fives, going to sporting events, having fun. I miss seeing them happy. In conclusion, I've received several emails from the district stating school's going to be full-time next year. Sadly, I have no faith in you guys that you'll do that. And even if it does happen, what restrictions will our children be subject to this time? I implore you to prove us wrong. Our kids deserve better. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Agenda item 5.1, board member comments. Well, I have a comment. I wanted to say hello to everyone, and I wrote it down because I knew I wouldn't be able to say it all. It's hard for me to believe that I've been your board president for a week now. If you would have told me a year ago that I would be serving as the president of the school board, I would have told you that you're nuts. I'm truly honored that my colleagues see so much potential in me, and I'm honored to be serving with this amazing group of board members. I know that we can do great things together. There has never been a board like this before. I am touched to be so welcomed into the community of those who have served before me, and I want to thank the members of our larger community, those that voted for me and those that didn't, because representing all of our community and all of our students is important to me. I think knowing a person's why is very important to understanding their motive to help. So I'd like to share mine with you. When I lost my father in the World Trade Center in 9/11, I made a conscious choice, rather than to sit in anger and hate, that I would choose to make a positive difference in the world in equal magnitude to the hate we saw that day, and in doing so, I would live a life that honored my father. My decision since then to work with children in foster care, to help raise a family that stands up for others, and to help leaders be the best has all been an extension of that, and now serving on the school board. So here's my promise to all of you, our community, our students, the administration, and my fellow board members. I promise to do my best, to listen, to be compassionate, and to move forward a strategic agenda for the betterment of our entire community and all of our students. I know I will not be perfect, but my heart will always be in the right place. And I want to thank you for your faith and trust, and for you to know that I do not take it lightly. Thank you.
Dr. Marino, I would like to say a few things. I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank Mr. Lightfoot, Mrs. Morgan, and Mr. Bauman for their service, and also to recognize Mrs. Kroner, Mrs. Swanson, and Mrs. Doyle for their service as well through a pandemic. No one prepares you to lead a school district through a pandemic. There's no manual, there's no book, and getting to know each of you, I've learned that you did the very best with what you had at the time. So thank you for your commitment to our students. I would also like to thank Dr. Sparlin and Ms. Dahlquist, because I know they also spent countless nights awake, making sure that they did what was best. It's very easy to sit on the outside, and I had to make a lot of those comments during campaigning, and it was hard because judging is easy from the other chair. I know you got thousands of emails from the board and the administration. You had to answer to a lot of different people all the time, and I know you did the best that you can. I'm also very excited and very proud to sit on this Board of Education with two people of color for the first time in our history, and I look forward to our Board of Education representing better our student body. So thank you very much.
Agenda item 5.2, board committee reports. Since Ruth Kroner couldn't be here, she gave me her update. The equity committee report, they finalized their equity statement and are ready to bring this to the board for next steps. And the only challenge so far is getting in-person attendance and determining the next mission of the committee. They did attempt to meet in person, but they did not have a quorum, so hopefully in the fall they'll be able to start meeting in person. Okay. 5.3, Superintendent's Report.
Well, good evening, Board. Tonight we have a heavier agenda under information, so I'm going to keep my comments brief. As you know, last week was Teacher Appreciation Week, and Tuesday was Teacher Appreciation Day. I wanted to take this opportunity to thank all of our teachers for all their good work that they are doing, and that they're doing so well, making a difference in our students' lives. This past year has been extremely hard on teachers, and our 308 teachers have done an outstanding job, and I hope they all know how much we appreciate them. And also last week was National Nurses Day, and I wanted to publicly thank our nurses for all that they do for our students and staff on a daily basis. We have some outstanding nurses here in 308, and being a school nurse is a stressful job, but being a school nurse during a pandemic is extremely stressful, and they've really stepped up and done a wonderful job, and I hope that they know how much we all value them as well. So that's, like I said, we have a lot of under information, so that's my report for this evening. Thank you.
Okay, apologize. Sorry, the minutes from the previous meeting, is that
Yeah,
for
approve consent.
secretary?
Make a motion to approve consent agenda.
Okay, 6.1, can I have a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting?
Actually, this is the consent agenda, so you make a motion for the entire section. So it's a
Okay.
motion to approve the consent agenda, including 6.1, 6.2, 6.3 if there were one, and it's
Okay.
just one motion.
All right, well, thank you. 6.0, approve, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I make a motion to approve all items under consent, including 6.1, minutes from the May 3rd, 2021 Special Board of Education meeting, and 6.2, to acknowledge the Freedom of Information Act request received by the district.
Second.
Mrs. Simulton,
Aye.
Dr. Marino,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson.
Aye.
Item 7.1 is information, financial statements. Does the board have any questions in regards to the financial information that's been provided this evening?
Could we just clarify on the year-to-date revenue, the local property taxes? I think we've only collected 51%. That's pretty normal, or that's due to COVID?
No,
or
that's normal.
Okay.
So in May, we'll start, you probably just got your tax bill over the
I
weekend. And it will be due June 6th, I believe, so we'll start to get payments then.
Okay.
All right, moving on. Item 7.2 is an informational item regarding the request and release of Kendall County land cash funds. Kendall County land cash fees are on the district. Kendall County collects land cash fees on the on behalf of the district for property in unincorporated areas. These fees are in lieu of donating land to the district for a new site that would be needed due to increased enrollment caused by any developed property. Kendall County is holding our balance of land cash in the amount of $13,427. And in order for us to receive these funds, we must submit a request to the Regional Superintendent of Schools along with a resolution stating that what the purpose of the use of these funds is. So does the board have any questions? And this is an annual item as well. Does the board have any questions regarding this informational item?
The only question I have, and I think that this is just that we've been doing this for so many years, it does say at the title of this attachment to David Balo.
Yeah, good.
I
know this is you.
I don't think he has become our regional, please forgive me if I have this wrong, but I don't believe he's become our regional superintendent.
No, he is not. Well, this is information, and we'll make sure it's corrected.
And again, I don't think that this is anything other than we've been doing this same form for that long.
All right, very good. Appreciate you bringing that to our attention. Christy, you've made a note of that?
Yep.
Thank you. All right, item 7.3 is student rights and responsibilities section of the handbook. 7.3 is another annual item, which is the student rights and responsibility. We have our Executive Director of Student Services, Val Patterson. Val's going to take us through the process, where student rights and responsibility has gone through to get to where we're at before the board looks at it for information. So Val, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Sparlin and Board of Education. The summary of updates and revisions that was provided to you included some background on the Rights and Responsibilities Code. It's reviewed annually. This year we did this in February and March, and the current school year's code was opened up for all administration to provide any concerns, questions, suggestions, revisions, and those updates are then reviewed and incorporated once the review hits my office and then also moves over into the Board of Education attorney's hands so that all of the updates and the changes have been properly vetted to be sure they're in alignment with not only board policy but also state laws and any other governing agencies or laws that we need to line up to. Also, the district's Parent Advisory Committee is within a special meeting of the board's Policy and Legislative Committee. We held that meeting on March 22nd, and we had a draft in place, and we're still taking, again, suggestions or possible updates. You can see that in the memo, the 2021 Parent Advisory Committee members were listed. When you saw an asterisk, it meant that they were present at that meeting, so they were able to vote. Also, you can see that there were several guests. The guests in attendance included our Executive Director of Special Education, Dr. Denise Hildebrand, Maureen Lemon, Board of Education Attorney, and Dawn Samosky, Director of Transportation, so that we made sure we could look at sections that included specifically student discipline on buses, student discipline of special education students, and again, we presented our draft at that point. All recommended changes and updates have been legally reviewed, and they've been incorporated into this draft that you see for the May 10th, this evening's Board of Education meeting for first reading, and then a second reading would be on June 7th for board approval. So information and then board approval in June.
Thank you, Val.
Are there
We
any
appreciate
questions?
that. Board, are there any questions regarding the updates to the student rights and responsibilities portion of the handbook?
Just double checking that I've got this right, that the main first change seems to be that it won't be in a printed handbook.
Correct. That was a budget adjustment for next year.
Any other questions regarding the student rights and responsibilities portion of the handbook? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Valor.
Thank you.
Item 7.4 is in regards to the consolidated grant application, and our Associate Superintendent, Faith Dahlquist, will share what this means, why we do it, and any questions the board may have.
So there's a lot of acronyms and a lot of grants, and I'm going to try to go through and explain some of those. It is the season that we do annually for our Consolidated District Plan. And while that opens right now, this beginning plan is not about what are we going to spend it on or anything. It's assurances that we have put in place so that we can get then access to additional grants. So the grants that are covered with the Consolidated District Plan involve Title I, which is related to our schools that have a higher percentage of students from low-income families, not to be confused with Title I Part A, which is more about school improvement, and those schools are not receiving money because of their percentage of low-income students. They're receiving funding because of needing improvement as identified by state test scores and other factors. Then Title II is around professional development and lots of different fundings and some flexibility with that. Title III is for our language learners and language instruction. Title IV is kind of a catch-all. It's safety, drug, health education. There's even gifted and enrichment pieces in it. Then IDA, which is our special education main grant. It's called the IDA flow-through. And then the IDA preschool, which is for our early childhood programs and services. The numbers that are on the slide right now are not the numbers for next year. This is the amount that was received for this school year. It does change, so we will not yet know what our final allocations will be till somewhat later into the summer and sometimes even into the fall. But once we put this in and is approved, then we start getting grant applications for those other pieces. So this was just to give you an idea of the types of money that come in through this. And then some of the plan requirements that are all listed and ready to go on the Illinois State Board of Education forms. We have to show evidence of coordination of those different grants, of how they would work together. We have to have a needs assessment, which we've done with our staff already this fall, where we've had them identify what professional development they need. We have different stakeholders where we've gone to the Teaching and Learning Committee on pieces around this. We have to show alignment with the state goals with what we would like to do, and then there are auditing processes that we have to guarantee. And then we do need to work with private schools and foster care within the area on this too. Very short but sweet version of the Consolidated District Plan.
Where all the money comes from for grants,
Correct.
most of it.
Very good. Any other questions regarding item 7.4? All right. Item 7.5 is the Boulder Hill School-Wide Title I Plan.
Also somewhat related, there are two different ways that schools within the Title I designation can receive money. One is targeted, where you really have to use the funds only for students from low-income families or struggling students. There's also a version called school-wide, and we have two of our schools that we are suggesting moving from targeted to school-wide. This allows a lot more flexibility to use resources to help all students within the building. It utilizes a lot more flexibility with what you can do with use of staff, and it's a very wise thing to do to provide that flexibility. So the one caveat is they have to go through the work to have the school-wide plan, and that needs to go to the board. So we're doing that for the first time. And I apologize for the amount of details that I gave you, but I wanted you to see the plans that Heather Kincaid and Lindsay Allen and the two school principals and their teams have put together to make this happen. This is only information at this particular meeting. It'll be at the next meeting that we ask for approval, so you'll have some time to digest that.
Very good. Faith, to be eligible for school-wide, school must have what percentage?
40%.
40%? And Boulder Hill is currently about 53%?
40% of
Students would be from low-income families.
May I just add a statement, please, regarding both of these schools? Very often when you see school improvement plans or school-wide Title I plans, I appreciate the title being changed to a school-wide title plan rather than school improvement, because in no way, shape, or form would I want to even hint or suggest that either of these schools are anything other than excellent schools. They are. Yes. And knowing both of these administrators and the diligence of their committees, I feel confident that our students are in good hands with them. And I appreciate that they'll be able to get the extra funding, hopefully, that they need to serve kids with higher needs.
Thank you, Laura. Any other questions regarding that item? 7.6 is the Long Beach school-wide Title I plan. Same information, but this
same
is now
comments.
for Long Beach, correct, Faith?
Correct.
Any questions regarding 7.6 Long Beach school-wide Title I plan?
What percentage is Long Beach? I know you said Boulder Hill is at 53%.
So about
60.8.
60, yes.
It's up about 10% from maybe 5 years ago.
That sounds
About right. Yeah, it was a little over 50%, I think, last I was there.
So this is the first time they've both gone to school-wide though, right?
correct.
So did they collaborate at all on their plans? Because I kind of sat with them, like I noticed it's like one school does this a little bit different in this school, so I just wonder if like one school's had more success.
And they also have different amount of allocations of money, so that makes a few things more possible or less possible. But I know that we get our elementary schools, all of our Title I schools together to talk about not only what their plans were, but how they assess them and finding the different successes of that. So that happens even outside of the school-wide plans.
Okay, we're going to move on to item 7.7. If you could pull the presentation up.
And I'd ask the ESD directors to come up to the mics.
All right, item 7.7 is our learning plan for fall, in-person and remote learning. Item 7.7 is our learning plan for fall, which we are very excited to be sharing with you this evening. There were 4 committees with a total of 84 people who worked on the plan that is being presented. We had an early childhood, elementary, junior high, and high school committee who came together on a number of occasions over the past couple of months in putting together this plan that is being presented for next fall. The board has been provided with a paper copy of this presentation, so I'd ask that you please take notes. I'm going to ask that you hold your questions until we're done with the presentation, because like a lot of presentations such as this, questions will be answered. A lot of your questions probably will be answered during the presentation. So the next slide, there are 3 areas this plan addresses. The first is in-person learning. So what does it look like for the fall, in-person learning? Remote learning, for those who qualify for remote learning, what will this look like for the fall? And then the federal funding for COVID plans that are all included in this evening's presentation. As I've communicated throughout on a variety of occasions, we are planning 5 full days of instruction with lunch for the fall. In 21-22, we are going to allocate additional time at the start of the year for establishing safe and nurturing climate. We believe that getting to know our kids, their backgrounds, what their interests are, where they see themselves down the road are very important variables in the equation of success for our students. And we are also building additional time into schedules for teaching behavior and social emotional skills and standards. And we have also built in additional time for increased support, for teacher training in a variety of these areas as well. And again, those will be highlighted when we talk about the specific levels. So slide 3, starting the year differently. As I said, we are allocating time within the day at all levels to teach and reinforce the safe and nurturing learning environments for all, fostering trusting relationships between students, staff, and families. We'll continue to implement the SD308 Climate for Learning framework, and we will be stressing the importance of checking for understanding through formative assessment to ensure our students learned what it is that we just taught, and when they didn't learn it, to reteach it when necessary. These are all items that we've been talking about for a couple of years. That's why it is very exciting to be talking to you this evening for implementation in the fall.
Good evening, I'm Heidi Pajasic. I'm the Director of Social Emotional Learning. And so this slide gives you a kind of graphic or visual definition of social emotional learning. And one of the things that we felt was important as we walked into next school year was to ensure that we are attending not just to the academic needs and development of our students, but we're continuing to support them with their social emotional development as well as their mental health and wellness. Social emotional learning is based upon 5 core competencies that are at the center of what we call the social emotional learning wheel. Those are self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, social awareness, and self-awareness. All of these pieces work together to support student success in life and in school. These competencies exist at the classroom level, where they are taught and reinforced through SEL curriculum and our content area instruction, and in the climate and culture of the classroom. We focus on them school-wide, and as we roll out the Climate for Learning framework and create safe, inclusive, and affirming learning environments, we're ensuring that those competencies live at the school-wide level. They live within our families and our caregivers as we develop our partnership with our parents, and within the community-based resources and opportunities that we provide in connection outside of our school walls. In order to do this for next year, we are implementing new social-emotional learning curriculum materials at kindergarten through 8th grade. This is not a significant departure. We have the second step curriculum in kindergarten through 8th grade. We are upgrading to the newest edition, which was revised during 2020. We are also implementing a mindfulness-based resource in early childhood through 12th grade that can be utilized by all staff in their classrooms and is also accessible to both parents and students at home to use as they see fit in the home environment. We have dedicated social-emotional learning time built into the schedule daily at early childhood through 5th grade, and then weekly in grades 6 through 8. And our social-emotional learning standards are embedded within the core content at all grade levels. It's important to note that a number of our secondary teachers implemented social-emotional learning activities this year, such as daily check-ins, goal setting, and perspective taking within their classes. And at the high school level, our kinetic wellness teachers did a phenomenal job building and implementing a unique SEL curriculum and lessons into their classes, and those standards are going to continue to live within that content area. We also continue to look at expanding our programming and supports for both students and staff around mental health and wellness, and we recognize this as an integral component to recovery as we return to next school year.
Good evening. I'm Lindsay Allen, Director of Elementary Education. Just as we have this school year in elementary, we'll continue to provide student support time to differentiate instruction to meet students' needs. The difference that we will see for this upcoming school year in person is we will have 2 student support times. One that is specifically designated for literacy, which is reading and writing, and then one that is designated for math.
And Shannon Luter's had a family emergency, so I'll be talking about junior high this evening. So one of the great things that happened during COVID is we learned some new tricks, and this was student support time and finding time in the day to provide differentiation and some coaching pieces. The way that we're wanting to build that in after the committee gave us some input at the junior high level is to take 5 minutes, usually at the end of the day, add it to the 14 minutes at the beginning of homeroom, and give it more structure. So that this would happen daily, where students could be able to go get more support or enrichment, and then one day of that week would be designated social emotional instruction that all of our students would be getting. And now I'll turn it over to Heather.
Good evening. My name is Heather Kincaid. I serve as the Executive Director of Accountability in High Schools. So in addition to the academic and SEL planning that is occurring to transition students back to the full 5 days in person, we wanted to be able to ensure opportunities for students to seek help during the school day. So what we're proposing to do is an alternate schedule, similar to an assembly schedule, twice a month. And what we would do is either assign students if necessary, or students would be able to select an intervention or an enrichment session. Things that we have discussed with both high schools are, at-risk students assignment by course, holding review sessions, opening up the writing center, structuring peer tutoring, retakes and makeups, college and career readiness, PSAT and SAT prep, and then student voice sessions. So those are some of the examples of the sessions that we're looking to offer, but the key thing is that based on our schedule at the high school, sometimes very tight, so we just wanted to make sure that we built in those supports and time within the school day. We're talking about offering it after second period where all students are in attendance.
Just like we've talked about student support, we also feel very strongly that we need to have strong teacher support. And as we've built things throughout the last 2 years of what we would want to do, there are a variety of topics. We feel strongly that it should not be a one and done, where you've now learned everything about literacy in the last 2 hours and you are good to go for the next 5 years. Instead, we have ongoing pieces of what this would look like. So we're mapping it out, not only for this year, but there's a big board in my room where we're talking about the second and third year of what that would look like. A main emphasis will be our Climate for Learning framework, which is, if you don't know what EC through 12 plus is, that is early childhood through 12 plus is our transition students. The big emphasis, as you've been hearing, is social emotional learning, reinforcing positive behavior, culture responsive teaching, amplifying student voice, and of course differentiation. We've had students that have done very well throughout all of this. We also have students that have struggled. So we will, differentiation has always been important, but it will be critical this year. We'll be rolling out the literacy framework for kindergarten through 8th grade and the math framework as well. And then because of all the Chromebooks that have come in, we really need to be thinking about instructional technology and all the different ways that we can do instruction better now that we have more technology. Some more lessons learned during COVID is ways to do professional development. It's a little bit easier to have cross-district meetings with all the teachers, and we can do that via remote. We also are really looking into having some asynchronous abilities to be able to provide those learning activities when teachers want them. We're looking at increasing coaching, and also something that I'm very excited that I had learned that other districts have been doing is that you can give professional development actually while teachers are teaching. For example, somebody could teach a 3rd grade math lesson across to all 3rd graders in the district and then have the teachers do the follow-up with that. You do require substitutes or other pieces, and you got to see, does it really work with my kids, and what that would look like.
For teaching staff early childhood through 8th grade, we'll continue with ongoing support and hands-on professional development at each of our school buildings. This will come in the form of instructional coaches, staff meetings, professional learning communities, and videos when appropriate.
So for the high school, what we are proposing is to do a once a month late start in order to have a dedicated 1 hour professional development time for our teachers and staff to support the Climate for Learning and instructional technology. So on this Monday, the student schedule would start at 8:20 instead of 7:20. We would not have a change to transportation, so students that would still need to participate in transportation to school, we will have supervision available for them.
We're now going to switch over and talk about remote learning for 21-22. So this will be a change. Remote learning would only be available to students that have an approved medical form for an in-person exemption. It would be important to note that students placed in remote learning will need to stay in remote learning for a whole grading period. You will not have the flexibility to go in and out, back and forth, and you'll see why in a little bit, why that is so crucial. And then we want to caution everyone, especially at the elementary level, that when you join back in person, we will try to have you attend your homeschool, but we cannot guarantee that based on classroom size and numbers. And there also may be some exceptions for our students with disabilities about staying in or out for an entire grading period.
I'm Denise Hildebrand, the Executive Director of Special Education. Good evening. I'll be speaking to early childhood. While the number of students who will qualify for remote learning is unknown at this time, remote learning plans include the following for early childhood. We are anticipating that we will have specific staff assigned to teach and support students in remote learning. There'll be one class per day rather than a morning and an afternoon session with a specific schedule, which will include virtual time and offline activities, but will also include virtual SEL and socialization time for students who will be learning from home. Related services, which include social work support, speech and language pathology, or occupational and physical therapy supports, will be provided virtually, but will also be offered on site on a walk-in basis.
For remote learning at the elementary level, we will also have separate teachers to work with students so that teachers are not having to provide both in-person and remote instruction. It's important to note that it will be a full remote day, just like in-person instruction, from 9 o'clock to 3:50. Since this is a long day, especially for our little ones online, there will be opportunities for breaks, snack, and lunch. For remote students who do qualify for 4th and 5th grade replacement math, they will live stream into a classroom with a gifted education teacher for their math instruction. And then finally for specials, which includes art, music, physical education, and library, the specials teacher will remote into the child's Google Classroom so that the student is not having to leave their general education classroom, go into a specials classroom, and then come back in. We'll have those specials teachers join the general education Google Classroom. And here is a sample of what a remote elementary schedule will look like. And again, it is very important to note that remote for elementary will be a full day of instruction from 9 o'clock to 3:50.
We're going to talk about junior high. We are also going to have separate teachers for the core content areas for the remote students. So remote students would have designated teachers in the core for a double period of English language arts, and then single periods of math, science, and social studies. For some of our band students, we do have many teachers that are interested in having a stream-in version of band. We do not know yet whether that would be at every single school, so it might not be with your home school.
Due to the number of courses that we currently offer at the high school, not every course will be available in a remote environment. So we will offer either virtual courses or courses through Edgenuity. We will combine students from both high schools in either the remote options, and we'll be working with approved students to either review or potentially select alternate courses if necessary.
Good evening. My name is Renee Sartor. I'm the Director of English Learners. So if there are students who require English learner services who are remote, they'll be served remotely through an English learner resource teacher. Dual language from kindergarten through 8th grade would not be available remotely. So dual language students who need remote learning would join a monolingual classroom with the option to return to dual language once they return in person if space allows.
For special education, self-contained programs at all levels will have designated remote learning teachers. While we are not sure it's the number of students that may be eligible for remote learning at this time, it may be that students from multiple buildings may be with one teacher. For example, we have STARS, which is our autism program, at Hunt Club Elementary, at Wolf's Crossing, Southbury, and also at Homestead Elementary. So it may be that there will be students from across different buildings that will be participating with one teacher if we have sufficient number of students across buildings to constitute a classroom. However, this is somewhat different than what is happening for general education. If a student does return to on-site instruction, we will make every effort for them to return to the program or building that they would have attended if they had been in person at the beginning of the school year. This will, our attempt to ensure that there's consistency in terms of the teachers and related service providers that they've had in previous years. Related services, again, as I mentioned for early childhood, will be provided remotely or on-site if appropriate. Our students that are in our resource programs, these are students who are receiving push-in or pull-out services or who in co-taught classes at all levels will have teachers and related services personnel assigned to them, and they will follow the schedules that would be recommended for general education. Eastview Academy and our transition programs will follow similar programming for students in remote learning that they have had this year, where they will be live streaming as appropriate. And again, as with our other levels and for students in our other programs, that if they choose to come on site for the provision of related services such as social work, speech and language pathology, occupational and physical therapy, they will have that option if requested. And they will receive those services virtually if they wish to do so.
So the timeline that we're hoping to follow for parents to request in-person exemption is that the form has already been shared with parents on April 30th. We wanted to get that out ahead of time, so if people needed to make doctor's appointments, they could. But by the end of this week, a video with the description not only of remote learning, but also in-person instruction plans for the fall will be shared with parents. And a reminder that parents will need to have this medical professional complete the in-person exemption form and return it by June 4th so we can make plans accordingly to allocate correct amount of staff and ensure that we get as many of the classes in place early on. Now we're going to switch a little bit here and talk about ESSER, which is the Elementary and Secondary Schools Emergency Relief, and I'm going to talk about the funding that has happened so far. So the name of the grants, Digital Equity, was out there for just a little over $1 million. We used that to pay some of the pieces of the Chromebooks and also iPads. ESSER 1 was around $1 million, and we purchased more student and staff devices as well as all of the cleaning equipment, the overtime for our custodians, and some of our touchless sanitizing machines. Now I'm going to talk about ESSER 2, which we've been allocated the $3.3 million, and then ESSER 3, which we've been told will be $7.5 million, but it has not been released with the application for that just yet. So as we looked at for establishing what are the priorities for allocations, we really looked at three things. Looking at addressing some of the schooling loss, as I said before, we have some students that have done well through this. We also have students that have struggled. So differentiation and providing coaching and instruction will be critical. Then we also wanted to utilize funds that were acceptable under ESSER for things that were already in the budget to help out with our bottom line. And then we also looked at our capital improvement projects, such as air conditioning and HVAC systems that are currently on the list of acceptable projects, also to help with our current budget. So these ESSER 2 funds need to be spent by September 2022. And while this is not a comprehensive list, these are some of our suggested allocations. The first item on here is 2 secondary coaches. And that's really with curriculum and professional development. You may recall that some of the budget cuts that were involved this year were taking away 5 part-time junior high instructional coaches as well as an assistant director for high school curriculum. These 2 people would help out with those pieces, and we still have all of the remote instruction that needs to be monitored and supported as well. We're looking at hiring an interventionist for each of the elementary schools as well as the Early Learning Center. These people, as Dr. Sparlin said in slide 3, are so critical to making sure that the foundation of literacy and numeracy is in place for our youngest students, because all of the learning that happens after that is dependent on a solid foundation. We're allocating the salaries of 10 teachers for remote instruction. That may not be additional funding from the budget. Those could be current teachers that are pushed over to remote learning as we see how many students would be in remote. But we can use this for either existing teachers or new teachers depending on the need. We're also looking at replacing some of our elementary reading materials that were distributed and very well loved during remote learning and are not coming back in the best of shape and need to be replaced, and we were close to the time on that anyway. We will need additional cleaning and sanitizing supplies. We're also looking at replacing 2 boilers at OHS. And then, especially at the high school level, the need for instructional technology coaches as all of those Chromebooks come into the building and we move one-to-one. We were not prepared for all of the professional development to deliver and to talk about how best to do that. Our devices were very delayed in coming in, and we'd like to have a chance to get that set up and done very correctly as all of those students come back into the fold next school year. And then ESSER 3, this again is not a comprehensive list, and we still have a couple of $1 million to think about on what else we would do. These funds do not need to be spent by September 2023. But some of the pieces that we're looking at, the literacy framework that we're so excited about, in order to be able to do differentiation really well, we need existing materials to be expanded to have much more choice for students and teachers, not only in the topics, but in the ability books. We also need a second step, as Dr. Pajasic talked about with the social emotional learning curriculum. High school assessment software, will need that. There's more budget for cleaning and sanitizing supplies. 2 chillers at Oswego East. And then a building automation system was already on the capital projects list, and we're looking at allocating funds to that. And then keeping those instructional tech coach positions going for the following school year, as well as the curriculum coach positions that were on the previous page going. Also, the interventionists that were talked about, that would be the salary for the second year. Then cybersecurity software, as you want to make sure that no one can hack into our system and what that looks like. That was a need already in the budget that we'd like to allocate funds for. We have some staff at the high school that are in dire need of some more updated Chromebooks. If you've been to our junior highs, the projectors are in need of some repair and are very dim, so excuse me, we're looking at that. And then our junior high access points need updating as well. Excuse me. All right. That was a lot of information, so go ahead and start off with questions.
I was going to say, I apologize for the length of the presentation, but this is planning for 21-22 is a big deal, and we wanted to make sure we were as comprehensive as can be. So as Faith just said, let's go ahead and start answering any questions that the board may have.
And just in case you have questions for Denise, I apologize. I asked her if she could go let Mrs. Kroner back in the building as she's returning to the meeting after the concert.
I got a couple.
Yeah.
Slide 7.
All right. Can you put the presentation back?
I guess.
Go ahead. While he's pulling it up, I have my slides.
My question on the junior high was, I guess my question is, what does that look like?
So every day at the beginning of the day, there would be the 19 to 20 minutes of time. They will be supervised out with staff. There will be, some students might have an additional study hall, but other students could be assigned to intervention time or have sign-up time that they wanted to go that. It could be test retakes. It could be enrichment types of pieces. 1 day a week will be the social emotional learning piece. But we are envisioning having the students divided up among all staff members, depending on what they needed and what their interests were. It could look different.
All right, and then at the high school level, we do, you guys had a couple of suggestions, but again, I speak from what I know, but at West Aurora, we call it AAC, it's an academic support period, and it's literally manned every single hour of the day. So if a kid has late start, he can sign in even online. They can sign in on a Zoom meeting and they can say, hey, I need help with chemistry, or hey, I need help with physics, or there's a science, a math, and English. And I think we also started Spanish for language.
I feel like I actually know somebody who was doing that for Spanish, anecdotally.
So I mean, just another, I assume that all of your teachers have a duty to, again, I'm assuming, which I should not do, I understand. But I think that provides a lot of opportunity for support, especially for kids who maybe leave school early, or kids who arrive late, or kids who just go to study hall. And, it's a half hour before math class and I got a big test next hour. And can somebody please help me? And we even have some of our kids, our peer tutors, sign into those and help kids as well. So it's another opportunity at the high school, even at the junior high level, where you can have kids help kids and teachers help kids, but you could literally do it all day long instead of just 19 minutes at the beginning or the ending of the day. So for what it's worth. And then on slide 8, again, every time you put differentiation on a slide, I circle it and I highlight it and right? And I've been doing this 21 years and I still struggle with differentiation. But at the end of the day, I think it also provides a unique opportunity, since we are now one-to-one, to cross-train across districts. And I know you guys talked about a late start on slide 10. So my big question on slide 10, I'm trying to keep going, trying to keep it moving. Okay. On slide 10, I assume you mean a PLC? But I could be wrong.
So not necessarily. What they would be doing is either professional development or work in their core teams. So, which is very similar to a PLC.
So for the people who don't know, a PLC, my teacher Ease, is a professional learning community. So it's all the physics teachers get together and we all talk about what unit we're on and how we taught it and what labs we want to do and who does it best and how did you do it. So I guess I have two questions. One is that in addition, are we still doing the Wednesday afternoon thing?
Yes.
Yes.
So this is in addition to the Wednesday afternoon thing?
Correct.
Correct.
And then how can I say this? So I guess I would want physics teachers to meet together. I would want Algebra 1 teachers to meet together. And I realize that teachers don't just teach one course, especially, and I'm talking more about the high school level, but also at the junior high, right? So I guess when you tell me one day a month, that's not nearly enough time to even get going on this.
No, and that's why we're going to use the Wednesday times primarily, Mrs. Swanson, for what you're talking about with the course teams and the department meetings. And then the Monday focus will be primarily professional learning and professional development.
Yeah.
So the Wednesdays occur more frequently. That's why we've scheduled those meetings as you described during the Wednesday times.
Okay, because to me, the district stuff, most of that can be sent out in an email or on a Zoom call. Like what?
Most of this isn't districts things, it's
Yeah.
building and their
Right.
content
'Cause
areas or their course areas.
I think
at
what
the high
also
school.
has happened with the one-to-one is I think that we've had pockets of buildings do things really, really, really well. And there hasn't really been any cross-contamination, if you will, right? So you have some buildings who are really excelling in one area and other buildings who are really just kind of struggling, whether it's, new staff or comfort level with the Chromebooks themselves or whatever the case may be. I don't think that we get these people together enough to make a difference right now. So when you guys tell me one day a month, if you're telling me you're switching the Wednesday meetings to that, then I'm in.
Yeah.
But I don't, you know what I mean? But
I know
struggling-
exactly what you're saying. Yes.
I'm struggling a lot with what do I need to tell them as a school? And what do I really need to bore down to get these kids to be more successful? Do you know what I mean? Like the socially emotional for me is nice, but what I really need you to do is be able to read. I mean, I want you to be nice to people, but I also need you to function as an adult in society.
Correct,
So-
and that social emotional piece is so connected with that because it's also about goal setting. It's also about managing your emotions. It's also about building a culture that students can take risks in academically and be able to speak. So there's a lot of you need both of that culture and the climate and the academic piece to really make a great learning environment.
Yeah, I mean, because like at some point I'd like to circle back to
I was
circa
going to go
2012
there.
and talk
Yeah.
about the common finals
Yeah.
and what we're actually teaching.
The grading
in Oswego
at the
versus
two high
Oswego
schools.
East, and we've had these conversations for many, many years. But I think that now that you have the ability to communicate across without having to drive across town and in a shorter amount of time gives us so much more opportunity.
Right.
But I would like to really see us as a district actually do that. And then slide 13. Big dollar signs on number 13. I'm the one that doesn't want to spend money ever. But when you tell me there's going to be separate teachers for remote learning, like in my head, dollar signs all over my page.
So, but also know that those students were also going to be in person for us. So
Right.
as you take off, maybe we'll have, I don't know how to predict, we have 20 first graders and 20 more if you had two sections of first grade, both at 20 for remote instruction, that's 40 students that also aren't going to be in person. So it's not additionally hiring, but it may be some, because sometimes the numbers
Yeah.
don't break for
Okay.
that, especially at elementary. But at junior high, you could have someone who's teaching one section of algebra remotely and the rest of it being in person.
Right, we
So
have that now.
It's not
Yeah.
always additional staff.
So I was cheering silently when you said the teachers wouldn't have to teach and, remote teach? Like, I don't even know how you do it. I can't even fathom it. But then on this slide, it says for gifted math. So are they teaching and getting in the gifted? Because like that concerns me a little bit.
So because there are so few students already in the gifted program, to designate a gifted only teacher to teach just remotely for those sections, that would definitely be an additional cost and might not have a whole lot of other students to interact with and be for. So they would be teaching in person and be live streaming in so our teachers of gifted would do both. So if you are in gifted math, you would have one period of math from the elementary day where you were live streaming in while a teacher was also doing in person. You could still have student support time.
Well, let me ask this. Could we, instead of that, could we maybe open it up to maybe some kids who were maybe on the bubble of gifted math? Because while I want to say that every grade is important, the ones that really count are in high school, right? So maybe those 4th and 5th graders who are kind of on the bubble who, you know what, maybe if given the right circumstance, they could we then split them out and say, hey, look, we can take 20 more kids. We're going to put you, we have this class that's offered remote. Maybe I got offered at the end of the day, and maybe they got to go somewhere else in the building to do it. But
so for in-person, I'm not understanding. You
Well,
wanted to create another in-person class of?
No, I'm talking about creating another, even if it's just a virtual. Like I'm talking about maybe adding enough kids to it to have a gifted virtual and a gifted.
But not necessarily from their home school.
Right. But still have the opportunity to give it a whirl. I mean, just, outside the box.
It's possible. It also is very integrated with the whole elementary school curriculum, because you have your other teacher for all the other subjects, and then it has to be math at that particular time,
right?
In order for them to rejoin the rest of their class. So we can look at that as a possibility, but the scheduling of that is sometimes quite difficult.
Could definitely be tough, but if we were doing all the same things and all this, and I'm not telling teachers how to teach, like that's not what I'm saying, that you have to do this on this day, but what I'm saying is there's enough time in the day to afford an opportunity that wouldn't otherwise exist.
So I'm going to piggyback off of what you're saying, because I think I understand it, and I actually saw some cases of this where we had some gifted teachers teaching one child in a classroom while they were live streaming with maybe 4 kids total, but there were more seats in that classroom. So I think what I'm hearing you say, I think I'm on the same train with this, that could we provide that instead of scoring it at 92 and a teacher recommendation on whatever the thing is, maybe go to 90, or they're already
we
in that
definitely
school,
can
in that
explore that. I
schedule.
just want to caution a little bit, because that's an accelerated program. So if you are putting students in and then the next year they haven't, they are having to exit, they might have to repeat the same math material again.
Or they could do a fantastic job.
Correct, but you have
There's
to
a risk
see.
with everything, I think.
Right, because I've also been on the receiving
Yeah,
end of the phone
yeah.
calls of why are you having him repeat what he or she had already done the year prior. I'm all for expanding the opportunities to do that, but it doesn't come without some risks.
Right. Well, I think parents would, I'd throw my kid in it. All right, my last one is on slide 21. All right. So I have said this before, and I don't know why districts don't do this more. So we're talking about hiring. I guess so my first question is, my big concern is hiring a position for a year or two, because I see in here you've got a couple of positions that look like a one-year position, but then you flip the page and it looks like we could have them for one more year for an additional cost. And I understand that at the risk of how much we've lost this year, right? But I also, when I see things like interventionists, especially at the early childhood and at K-6, so there's a thing called Erlin screenings, and I know this because my own kid did it, and we don't do it, and I know that I have brought it up a couple of times. And I know that we don't have anybody in district who does it. I know there are people in the general area who do it. And I know that my own 2 kids sat in reading interventions for 5 years with some really fantastic teachers, but neither one of them really needed to be there. One of them needed a pair of glasses and the other one needed a blue overhead. And we spent 4 years behind in language arts because nobody ever said to me, go get them tested for Erlen. It's just a screener, and it's just colored overheads. So I guess if I'm looking at all this money that we're spending, I would maybe like to explore that a little bit. Because I think a lot of these kids who are, ADD, ADHD, needing reading services, probably some of them just need a pair of glasses. Right, Alan's eyes over converge, so he can't track and focus. A pair of glasses fixed it. There was nothing wrong with his eyesight, but a pair of glasses fixed it. And I don't know that we explore that type of stuff, and we have the opportunity to do it. All right, I took up enough time.
Can I ask a couple just more practical numbers-based questions, if you don't mind? The ESSER funds, they're required to be spent by a certain amount of time, and there's a certain amount, or certain types of things that we can spend them on. Is there a percentage of supplementation versus supplantation that we must follow? Or can we, because I've been seeing a lot of things that are just in our budget. What will we use the budget that we have for them on then?
So the requirement is that you need to use 20% of the funding for academic and schooling purposes to address schooling loss or improve instruction. There are not the requirements of supplant or go back. We have a lot of flexibility with the ESSER monies that we don't have with the other types of grants. So really we were trying to look at our bottom line and where that was, and we know that we've just been through rounds of budget cuts, and we were allowed to think about, all right, what are some of the things that we were wanting to do? But kind of to Allie's point, we didn't want to add on all new expenses or those pieces and then have to take that away later on. We wanted to use some of the funds to make the budget a little bit prettier and put us in more stable pieces so that we are not making budget cuts later on.
So that leads to my follow-up question, because when I'm looking at student learning recovery, I'm looking at boilers at a high school going, that's not going to help students recover learning that's been lost. Now, this is capital projects. We've got the $700,000 in ESSER 2 and in ESSER 3. I'm seeing, where was that whole list? The 2 chillers, 1.7 million in building automation systems upgrades for 18 buildings. That's, what is this, $2.4 million of this in 2 years on capital expenses. Now, my understanding is we do often receive capital funding. Dr. Sparlin, we've been talking about some that you've been keeping an eye on for a while that can only be used for capital projects. So I guess my question is, why wouldn't we use an extra $2.4 million for student learning recovery? Why would we use it for capital projects when we can get capital money just for those?
Yeah, right now with the capital piece that you're referring to is, we, that's still in the air kind of thing. We don't know that for sure.
Right.
And then, over the last couple of years, we've been allocated some monies through the House and through the Senate. But again, I don't know when those types of monies are coming. And so this is an opportunity to take care of some of the capital projects that are looming that do need to get done. But if we were to get those, if we were to get those monies, which we may, then obviously we would use that money to pay for these types of projects.
So the building automation system upgrades for 18 buildings, this is a necessity that we've got to have?
Chrissy?
It helps to, one of the things we can use ESSER funds is to help with airflow, things like that. So that was what we were trying to address here. The building automation, some of the buildings have already been upgraded. This would do the rest of the district so that somebody can control airflow from their computer. So if something goes down, somebody can check remotely, get into that system and maybe do some kind of a fix.
Building automation is a really cool thing, but I guess for me, my question is going to be, is it cool enough to take away $1 million from other supports that, especially for the next couple of years, our kids are going to need just to provide them with recovery.
Lori, I think Faith had mentioned it earlier. This isn't an all-encompassing list. There's still, if you total this up, I think there's still a couple
Right.
$1 million. It's like a $5.5 million ideas list right here.
Mhm.
But there's still a couple $1 million in there for additional thoughts as we
Right, I
move forward
totally
with this.
get all of that, but I'm just talking about this $1 million. And I guess I want to make sure that we're not spending it, I get that our chillers and boilers go out, they take about 8 months when they go out, so we need to plan ahead for those. But when I'm looking at $1 million of building automation in 18 buildings, when we've only done 5 to this point, why can't we slow that down and then use some of this $1 million for additional supports? Because there will always be more supports that our kids are going to need that we aren't providing.
So I'm with Lori on that as well. I understand that we have lots of capital projects that have been put off for years and are kind of reaching the breaking point. So I get that. And I apologize if these questions have been answered already in the presentation, because I did come back in late. Band concert was excellent, by the way. What I feel like what I'm not seeing on here, and maybe just because this is not a comprehensive list, is I would love to see after-school things that can both help academically and social emotionally. You know, a couple of years ago, we had to cut junior high sports from the budget because we had to.
That's what I'm saying too.
That's, you know, that can be a big social emotional thing for kids, and something that encourages them and builds community and teamwork and helps kids feel like they're part of something, or gives them a place to fit in. And that's not the only thing that we have cut in the last several years. There have been lots of things, but that kind of stands out in my mind as something that clearly was important to our community. And I know I had kids in junior high who participated not in sports, they had no interest, and others that did, and it was a wonderful experience. And I feel like we cut activity buses as well, because
those were the two I was
we had
kind of
to.
heading toward. Actually, for that social emotional piece, what we keep hearing at budget cuts is that fact that our after-school sports at the high school level really impact our students and grades and wanting to come to school and eligibility. We've pulled that from the junior high, and arguably in the social emotional realm, junior high has been the hardest hit. While I would love to see building automation systems, and I'm not going to tell you how much I actually really do love building automation. This could fund those programs after school. It could give every kid an opportunity to stay after school for a sport, not just ones who can get a ride home. It could give every kid an opportunity to stay after school for a club, not just those who can get a ride home. And it can provide opportunities for tutoring and peer coaching and things like that we could have. So I just would hate to see that it's convenient to add more to the back end. And like I said, the chillers, the boilers, I get the long lag time there. I get that we kind of got to get the money while we can, but I really think that for our kids, we can do better. We can do more for after school if we just put the money toward them instead. Although it would be super cool to be able to remote change the temperature, because I can do that from my home, and it's fun. My family doesn't like it if I do it while I'm here, but you know.
Well, I think Lori and Ruth make some really good points, and as well as Allie. You know, I'm really concerned for our kids. I'm glad that I see 5 full days a week. I know Allie's very focused on the academic support, and I agree with that. I'm also very focused on the social emotional support, and you know, the sports, the after school activities, after these kids have been in isolation for a year, I mean, those are, I mean, they're so crucial. They're so crucial to their sense of belonging and community. And for kids who are struggling academically, that may be the only place they feel good about themselves. I think we're trying to accomplish a lot here, and I really appreciate everything the administration has put into this, without a doubt. But I'm concerned when I see things like like that 19 minutes in the morning with the junior high. It seems like we're trying to accomplish a lot in 19 minutes and what is really going to get done. And it seems like 4 days of the week, those 19 minutes are focused on academics, and 1 is social emotional. And we're really going to see a mix. We're going to see kids who, who even did great academically remotely, but they're falling apart. They are just really falling apart. And so how can we get the kids what they need, during that time, and is that enough time? I loved Allie's idea of like the support all day, like if we could manage something like that where kids can check in. And I think both academically and social emotionally, there's just so many kids struggling. I'm curious why we have a late start, but we can't offer the transportation at that start time, and what those kids are going to do for an hour. Are they just going to be wandering the halls, or is there going to be something provided for them?
No, there would be supervision. It could be a study hall type of thing. It could be that there are other activities that are going on at the same time. The reason that we can't do transportation is our buses run 3 routes. They run a high school and a junior high and elementary. So if you change the start time of one level, you have to change it for all the other levels as well. And having a delayed start or an early release at the elementary level is much more impactful for parents and all of those pieces. So that's why just at the high school level, and why we're not changing the time of transportation.
Okay, I get that.
Or why not do it one day every week and let junior high teachers, I know, I'm barking up that tree again. Why not let the junior high teachers all meet together? Let's take all our language ones and put them together.
You just have to have a different time for junior high to supervise all those students too.
Yeah. But if we did it every week, could we adjust the schedules so that it wasn't as impactful?
Are you saying
Like shorten lunch?
like every week each, like high school starts an hour late, junior high starts an hour late, elementary starts?
Yeah, like on a regular school year, we would start every Monday an hour, I can't even remember now. It's been, I feel like it's been forever. But we had an hour and 10 minutes maybe that we got to meet with our teams. And again, like 1 week it was chemistry, 1 week it was biology, you know what I mean? Like you kind of went back and forth in between your teams, but everybody knew that the bus came that much later because it's Monday. And it just, again, it's about having time, right? So all these teachers have done all these great things, but you know what I mean? Like not everybody knows about them. Not everybody, works well on their team, and not everybody knows who's at the other high school.
Or they've had kids that have had different needs, that next year they'll have different kids with things that maybe someone else encountered.
Yeah. So just, if we're gonna do it, let's go all in on it. That's my point. Like, if we're gonna commit to 1 day a month, then why aren't we committing to 1 day every week? But that being the case, I don't want to give teachers an extra hour and a half in the morning to just hide in a room and do their own work. You know what I mean?
No, it
like
would
I
need to
also
be-
want to ensure that they're meeting with their teams.
Right, it needs to be very structured, and that time can be really, really valuable. We're also cautious at limiting the amount of in-person instruction more to our students coming off of this too. I personally have witnessed all the great things that can happen while you give teachers time to do that, but we're also coming off of a time where people are like, well, teachers need to be teaching all day, why? So trying to balance that perception of teachers having time off. I know it's not time off. I know it's very well spent, but trying to find that right balance between doing that and limiting instructional time. I do think it's more difficult on parents at the elementary and the junior high level to change that start time than it is at the high school, where they're pretty great at finding out who has cars and who has a mom that can drive them and go at that later time without disrupting the family.
And they don't need additional childcare kind of thing.
Right. So I mean, I would ask Dawn if maybe she can, I mean, how much are we impacting buses? Like by an hour? I mean, are we talking about not picking up till 4:30?
For, at the high school level, everybody, all the buses would continue to run the same times.
Right.
So it would just be, if you now wanted to delay, junior high or elementary, everybody would be delayed by, you could push it all back by an hour. I worry about the impact of that on our elementary families. I would love that time, but.
She's giving me the.
No, it would be wonderful time, but I think that would be really difficult. I think of when we changed our elementary start time from 8:45 to 9 o'clock,
Right.
and the huge impact that had on parents trying to get to work and having to provide extra daycare for their students was hard. So I would love, I've asked, can we do a late start? But I really do think it would be difficult on our community.
Some of the creative ways that Lindsay and I have talked about on how to provide some of that at the elementary level is by using assemblies, or I know when I was elementary principal, I used to teach aerobics for 3 grade levels at a time. I know in COVID you can't do that, but, and then give staff time to do that. So there are some other ways when the school is not so large that you can build that into the day if you get creative and do some problem solving pieces to provide that.
So
I have a few more.
Sorry. You go ahead.
You want to go?
You go
All right.
You might have the same questions I do.
Okay, we'll see. Do we have an estimate of how many students we expect to qualify for remote?
We do not.
We don't. Okay. And do we know if special education students are going to be more affected by that or more likely to meet that criteria?
It really goes by the health of the families at home. There might be some more students that were impacted on that. I don't have an idea of higher percentages or what that would look like. I don't think we're seeing a higher percentage of remote students in special education compared to some of our other schools.
That is true, although we've had some preliminary inquiries already for those children who are immune compromised or who have some other disabilities that might put them at greater risk than their peers when everyone is returning to school. But as Ms. Dahlquist said, at this point, we have no idea how many families will actually qualify and make that request.
I just think it's something we have to be mindful of, that they might be disproportionately affected because of those issues. And I mean, it does concern me to get certain services virtually and the difference between receiving that in person. And as we talk about equity, I just want to make sure that we are looking out for those kids and making sure that they're getting a truly equitable education.
And that is the #1 priority for us
Yeah.
as well. And that's why, as I've mentioned before, that some families have elected to bring their children into the building for specific services to ensure that they are able to receive them optimally. I think physical therapy is a really good example of that, where it's very difficult to provide virtually. But so we have had some families who have had their children attend on site for those specific services as well.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn it to you, Ruth.
Okay. On page 13, in the elementary plan, so are there going to be specific remote specials teachers? Like, for example, there's one art teacher who's the remote art teacher, and they just go from the 1st grade remote classroom to the 2nd grade or are these going to be from a specific building in addition to their, I'm just confused as to how the specials are going to work.
So it'll probably be, but it depends on numbers again, that it would just be the teacher from that school teaching a remote piece that could service a whole bunch of students from other schools. So I don't see that they will be a remote art teacher all day. They could be in person for many students and then have one section of 1st grade remote only for students from around the district.
Okay, so like maybe the teacher from Hunt Club would do the 1st grade remote and from Southbury would do the 2nd grade remote. Okay.
Depending on the number of sections that they're already teaching. Some of them have
Sure.
more room in their schedules than others.
And that kind of segues to my next question, was how are we selecting the remote teachers? Is that going to be an application process? Because I know we may still have some teachers who are concerned for health reasons as well. I don't know if it would be like seniority, or we're going to pick you, or?
So there'll be several different prongs. One of the first ones is to establish who for medical reasons needs to do that or would need to be on a leave, because we would like to give teachers that opportunity than being on a leave. But there'd have to be a good match between what they already are certified to teach and what we have. But that would be the first piece. And then we would be doing postings for those positions and see who would like to be interested, and we can interview, because some of those skills, in-person teaching and remote teaching, are different. So we want to really look at what those pieces would look like, and then also look at what the team of remote teachers we're putting together is for an elementary, because we're probably going to have like a remote school for those teachers, and they'll need to be able to work together and have different skill sets. And the same at junior high and high school, except they may not be remote teachers all day. They might have some in-person classes and some remote classes.
Okay. On page 15, it says there will be separate sections for the remote students, and they will have these core periods. Does that mean they'll have direct online instruction only and not like live streaming? Okay.
Correct.
And my second question about that is, this mentions a double period of ELA, math, science, and social studies. So normally they have electives at the junior high. Are they just going to have a shorter day, or will they have an opportunity to also utilize something like Edgenuity or something similar to provide electives for those students who are remote?
We need to see how many students are needing remote instruction and what that looks like. I know that Shannon Luders has already had conversations with most, if not all, of the band teachers, and they would be willing to have those students stream in, to join in band and what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So that may be a possibility for some of those other electives. But until we know how many students, we're hesitate. We would like to underpromise and overdeliver than the other way around.
Okay, but it could certainly be a possibility of utilizing something like Edgenuity just for a special. I'm just thinking, like, if I've got only 5 periods, what do they do the rest of the day? They just have a short day? Like, I don't know. I think that's maybe possibly a missed opportunity if there are. I know Edgenuity doesn't have every elective under the sun, but we don't have a huge variety of electives at, and it might be something different. Like, you're not taking home ec, but you're taking, I don't know, certainly languages, I would think, would be offered on Edgenuity. I know we have a PE requirement at the high school level for graduation. Is there no PE requirement at junior high?
So there is that you would be involved in a PE class, and that is one of the things that we might be doing with a coach, and have it be, what are the physical activity are you doing and that kind of thing, rather than watching a PE class or doing those pieces, but having a plan for what that would look like into the student's day that could be incorporated with what they have at home or what they are able to do.
Okay. So for the high school students, it mentions having separate sections if there are enough students. So if there are not enough for a separate remote section, does that mean that they would just live stream into those classrooms? Because
there also will be some classes that will not be available.
Okay.
And I know I'm sounding very wishy-washy, but until we know the numbers of students that we're talking about, it's very hard to predict what all of the thousands of courses that we offer we can do in the various forms.
Right. And so then Edgenuity, it says in here, would be potentially an option at that as well. Okay.
Correct.
Are we combining, I know at the elementary level we're combining across all buildings. Are we doing the same with the junior highs and the high schools?
Yes.
Okay. So, page 17, where it talks about the timeline here. So it's saying the video with description of what the options are will be shared May 14th. They will need to have a medical professional complete the in-person exemption form and return it by June 4th. That seems like a fairly small window to get potentially a medical appointment and get this thing filled out.
Right.
Would there be a possibility of a family saying, we intend to get this, we have an appointment scheduled, our doctor couldn't get us in till June 10th, or,
Yeah, we can take here's what it looks like. We did push out the form on April 30th to parents to give them the heads up that they needed to be making the appointments if they're going to need that. But yes, we can be flexible if they have a doctor's appointment. And we'd rather know about the possibility and start building it, but what we don't want is for people to wait until August, and then we're scrambling to hire all the different people and the coordination of all of those classes. Because the more we know what our numbers are, the faster we can get to working on hiring teachers and building a quality program.
But again, if a student is diagnosed with a condition that would make them unable to come in sometime over the summer, they wouldn't be excluded from remote
Correct,
education.
but we're envisioning this for the students and families that already know.
I think the rest of my questions were answered.
I have a few questions and a comment or statement. Regarding the reading interventionist, when I saw the idea, it just made me question, was it a need, or is it more of it's a best in class idea to have a reading interventionist at every school, or is it a need that we have?
It is a need, and it's not just reading interventions. It is also math interventions at the younger grades.
Okay.
And we do not have math interventionists at any of our schools that are district provided. So anything that is being pulled out or doing interventions for math is on our gen ed teachers or by some Title I funding that schools that have Title I have put in place. So this is something I believe strongly that we need to be doing, even if we were not at the end of a pandemic, that this is really what is best practice to be able to really make sure whatever interventions and things we can put into our younger grades to ensure that they are where they need to be, that eliminates the need further for some of our special education services. It makes mental health better, it reduces discipline, all of those pieces. The stronger that we can have our students really know basics of literacy and numeracy makes all the rest of it work better. And I realize the state of Illinois says third grade is when we should start assessing, and we pay all this attention to ACT and SAT, but elementary and curriculum piece, if we can't get it right, K through 3, we are forever playing catch up.
Agreed. Yeah, and I totally agree. I just was interested in, was it driven by need, or was it driven by it's something that we want to elevate to? So is that interventionist the same for math and ELA?
Yes, that's one to provide, and based that will be utilized by each building by what they identify as needs. For the first 6 weeks of school at elementary will be different this year, that we won't say, okay, you are now in this intervention for this amount of time. It will be all hands on deck of how do we differentiate, give students a lot of experience, and watch them really zoom and grow, hopefully, and then decide who needs to be in very solid interventions. So a lot of intensive time at the beginning of the school year to differentiate and find out what is some schooling loss, what is really learning loss, and then move forward from that.
Thank you very much for that. Regarding social emotional and kind of setting benchmarks for where we're at, embedding it in classes throughout the day, where are we benchmarked? So right now, are we embedding in, let's say, math and ELA and social studies, and we're looking to embed, and this is for each grade level, so elementary, are we looking to embed in more classes? How are we elevating it, I guess?
So with our Climate for Learning, there's a couple of different pieces. There's explicit instruction that we really need to solidify, and you can feel free to jump in if you'd like. I don't mean to always jump in the microphone, but we really need that explicit instruction to this is what it looks like, and it's not just embedded and we kind of call attention. It's really even putting social emotional learning targets up on the board and sharing with them like this is what we're going to talk about, and then embedding it throughout the day. And going back, I think it's really important that our students know what skills we're working on and have them reflect on how they're doing on their own and thinking about that. And that causes more time in the day and really some explicit and reflection time. Not just the teacher knew that we put it into science and social studies on what that looks like. And then really amplifying student voice is a huge part of that with diversity, equity, and inclusion of how are they feeling about those pieces, not only for their own mental and social abilities, but how they are fitting into that community and how that community is teaching them. So I'm sorry. Was there other things you wanted to?
I also think too at the elementary level, currently what we've done, past practice has been once a week for a half an hour, there's a second step lesson, and it's kind of follow the script and then move on. We're going to be offering SEL support time every day. And the new resources that we will have too will enhance that instruction, and then we would like to see the teachers referencing that and utilizing that within the learning targets and all the core curricular areas too.
Yeah, so we really do it two different ways within the core content. One is very skill-based, so especially as kids get older, when we teach them skills, I think earlier Faith referenced goal setting, or when we teach them how to advocate for themselves, or we teach them, you know, that we work on those growth mindset pieces, we work on those specific skills to help them grow. We also identify points within the curriculum that those 5 competencies live. So that happens most naturally in social studies and in English language arts. So when we talk about a character in a novel and we talk about the decisions that they've made, the ethical, you know, implications of that, would you have made the same decision? What is the process you would have used to make that decision? We're tying it directly to those reading standards and the social emotional learning standards living together. In social studies, we're looking at historical perspectives, different ways that you know, those things have come into being over time. So we do it both through the actual, you know, they're learning the math or the English content and the social studies content with a social emotional perspective. We're also directly teaching them skills that they need in those academic content areas to be successful.
I appreciate that, which it just kind of leads me into my final, it's sort of a question and sort of a comment. We're in this kind of position, and every school district, every educator, where we don't know what we don't know yet when we come back to school next year. We are coming out of a pandemic, hopefully, and we don't know what those social emotional needs are going to be, not only for our students, but also for our educators. And so I guess my question and comment is I hope that we use some of this extra time, whether it be in the PLCs, whether it be in professional development days, to support our educators and our administrators through what we're going to be coming out of. So that's sort of my comment. And then for our students as well, because we don't exactly know what their needs are going to be. And it's going to look very different than, and we can make some educated guesses, but we don't know what that's going to look like. And in one of those ways, and this is where my question comes in, is we see, like, for instance, students right now, you know, they'll have, I'm just going to use a very simple elementary example. They're using YouTube, like Go Noodle or whatever it's called, for their, you know, for social emotional or for brain breaks or all this kind of stuff. We're using a lot of technology-based teaching, you know, in that. And so I'm just wondering, is there going to be kind of an adjustment to that so that we can get back to kind of the, you know, manipulative and hand over hand and that type of stuff? And this is much more elementary driven, I apologize. But kind of getting back to that collaboration, because students learn from each other and so forth, and kind of pulling away from technology a little bit.
Yeah, it's just because we're getting Chromebooks does not mean that they should be in front of Chromebooks all the time. I like to talk a lot about the ability to get and keep a job is the ability to talk to people to set up relationships, to get up and give a speech, to do all of those things that we really need to do. And the soft skills, if you will, although I kind of don't like that term, are really what is going to make it for a lot of our students. And that happens best without Chromebooks. So there needs to be time, and part of the thing that we're talking about with even the high school instructional coaches are systems of, okay, is class today an all green and you can use your Chromebooks all the time? Or is it a time that, oh, nope, all the Chromebooks are going to be done? We even have to do that in meetings sometimes. We're like,
Exactly.
This is going to be done because I can answer emails and I'm not fully present. So yes, there needs to be the emphasis on that. COVID, even when you bring people back, it has a little bit more difficult because right now I think I can read your nonverbals, but I'd be so much better if I could see your whole face. But even manipulatives and sharing all of those things has felt very different when we come in because we're not supposed to be sharing a whole lot of materials. First graders that want to get together and play don't naturally sit 3 or 6 feet apart from each other. So that collaboration piece, depending on what the guidelines are at the time, will need some tweaking and some reminding of what's still possible with face-to-face and collaboration.
Yeah, and I should have prefaced it with, of course, I mean, safety is tantamount,
right.
But also just having you collaborate with your cohorts in a different way, and you learn in a different way. So just making sure that we kind of get back to a little bit of the basics and so forth as we move forward. Thank you.
Yes, looking forward to that.
That actually reminded me of something else I've been seeing on here, or not seeing, when we talk about the social emotional, is that while I'm totally all in on we need to start kids pre-K through 3, the reality is we've got all these older kids that didn't get that pre-K through 3 and are still struggling on that. But we also have nothing in here about additional needs for social work or counselors at the junior high school level. And we know that the needs for those are probably going to be greater. Have you guys given any thought to, one, discipline changes when kids come back? Sometimes discipline is more, sometimes we hope not, but how will we be allowing for extra time for discipline, for extra social work needs, and for the fact that these students are going to need a little more guidance at the high school level than perhaps they do in normal years?
So one of the things that isn't staff related but is more of the system we use in this district called the Significant 72, where you're really working on the first 3 days of process and positive behaviors. It's going to be a lot longer than 3 days. We've talked about the need for teaching and reinforcing that, and the high schools are working very hard at having a common experience about what are positive behaviors and what are the expectations, which is not something that we've had in place before to be able to do that. The junior highs have that in place, but we've already talked that we're going to have to remind and rethink and reinforce and be really positive with that. There are things that we could look at for more staff. Again, we were being cautious with creating positions that might not be there later on. We don't yet know how many students would be in a remote and what that looks like. We are really working on the proactive approach right now to building that climate for learning that would be really supportive of all students. We have been looking at different ways to support our behavioral teams and those people that teachers need to call on when they have a case that they're concerned about on how to deal with that. We're using our elementary instructional coaches, and the plan has always been that they would be reading and math and tech, and now we're adding behavioral to that so that the teachers have an expert in the building that has a direct pipeline to a lot of professional development to help with teachers provide that differentiation for behavior and support. We could look at more.
Yeah, it just seems like there's a lot there for elementary, but the junior high school piece, I mean, there's those same needs.
We have a couple pieces that are in place that, we are expanding from what we currently have. So one being, we have a district partnership with Family Counseling Services. So we have expanded that memo. Our current agreement ends in June, and I'm working with them right now on our agreement for next year to include more group therapy sessions availability at all of our schools, but primarily some targeted schools as well. And then also the availability of individual students being able to receive therapy needs that they have during the school day in partnership, either individual themselves or with their families. So we're able to expand that program with no cost to the district. We also have 3 postings out at Aurora University right now. We have a partnership with them for interns, and we're looking for Masters of Social Work level interns to work in. We have a junior high posting, a high school posting, and then one for our alternative program in order to be able to provide some more, some intervention, triaging, data collecting support, working directly with those students. So those are things that we wouldn't have to look at eliminating down the road. Those are 2 things that we can continue to grow and expand. We also are looking at other opportunities for mental health supports within the district. And we're also looking at expanding our youth mental health first aid training options for our secondary staff so that they are able to identify early warning signs and sooner know how to respond to those students and then refer them to the student sports that are available within the school. So those are things that we would be able to build on and continue over time rather than have to look at taking away.
That's exactly kind of what I think I was thinking of. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Right, and the work of the committee for the high school with SEL really focused on transition, school-wide supports, and classroom-based supports. So some of the transition is expanding the summer orientation that's optional, not just for incoming freshmen, but also having days for incoming sophomores. They're going to rebuild the orientation that's mandatory. Typically, it was just the first day of school for freshmen. They're building a freshman orientation, a sophomore orientation, and a junior-senior orientation. And then as Faith mentioned and Heidi, the significant 72, well, they've increased and are building out what they've been calling beyond the significant 72, because it will definitely be more than the first 3 days. So there has been conversation and planning, both as we transition back, then school-wide and classroom-based.
Thank you.
And what are our thoughts on like hiring restorative practitioners as a part of this? Can ESSER funds be used for that?
There is a lot of leeway with ESSER funds on what that looks like. With the restorative practices, yes. With restorative discipline, I think there are some steps that we need to put in first to having common expectations for behavior and looking at those systems piece first, because I think putting that on place of a shaky system wouldn't be the best. I think we really need to look at tier 1 or universal with that, but on restorative circles and having those pieces and having training like that within the classrooms, I could see a real use for that. That could be something that our secondary instructional coaches, I know I'm spreading them thin already, but those are things that they could do, because as they provide they get a lot of professional development, they will have that access to be able to train other people. And what's really great is that they could go into a classroom and model it and teach it and have it recorded and have other people do that. We'd have to be careful about student privacy and those pieces, but rethinking what professional development and coaching would be to utilize all of the things that we've learned through COVID could really expand that.
I just have one comment, one thought.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, just thank you for your time and thoughtfulness that you guys put into this plan. It's great. But first, so many of the items that are listed within the budget are fixed costs, but based on the budgets that you all have listed and the funds that are being received, like what was the projected number of years that you considered for the staff positions that are here? I think I know what it is based on what I'm reading, but I just...
It's just 2 years for the positions that are salaries in here, because then we will be out of funds.
Yeah,
so any new positions that we do, we could relook at where we're at in 2 years and whether we've had EBF and whether we saw that there was a really great need and could reallocate. One of the things that I am a proponent of doing with budgets is to say, okay, you'd really like to keep this, well then what else could we give up, you know, if we need to, and this may play out to be, we really need math interventionist, so, okay, what are we willing to do to tighten the belt elsewhere? But I can't guarantee that these positions would be here for long term.
And then also growth is always happening. I'm seeing a lot of builders trying to start up. My suspicion would be that there might be some student growth ahead of us if we ever start getting lumber back. Or whatever we're gonna say is the reason. I heard there's a chicken shortage too. So that would be my guess.
I have one more question, sorry. That's maybe, this is a person, like, not a staffing position. But can we just talk for a quick second about spelling? Maybe I'm old-fashioned or old school, but I feel, and I know spelling is not required by the state, but I feel like we are doing our kids a huge disservice by not teaching them spelling. Like a formal spelling. Like, my kids are terrible spellers. And my older two have had spelling in elementary, and they're not so bad, but my youngest, the kid, I mean, it's pretty bad.
So I don't want to steal the,
I know, Lindsay's
I was
gonna
gonna
kill
say,
me.
She's jumping. She knows that literacy is my thing. So we have been working really, really hard over the past 2 years on a K-8 literacy framework. And I will say, I have never been on a committee where we've been able to put elementary and junior high together. And wow, you guys will see this probably closer to the start of the school year, right after school year starts. But there is a huge focus on their K-8 for word work and word study. And so we're talking about what does that look like? We're talking about, you know, phonics, phonemic awareness, spelling, what all of that looks like together, but not just at elementary, not just at junior high, but K-8, and how does it progress through there? And what resources are we going to use? And what professional development are we going to do on an ongoing basis with our teachers? So that will be coming. Just give us a little bit of time.
That's excellent news, Dr. Allen, because my kids use Google and spell check to learn how to spell, and I don't feel like that is the best plan. And I think that part of our, you know, we see some test scoring ELA issues, and I think a lot of that stems from they can't read as well because they don't know how to spell. That's just my opinion.
I just want to say that, again, you highlighted very briefly the K-8 component, bringing junior high and elementary school together for these conversations. And to me, that is just such a fundamental shift, but so needed, because kids are not going into junior high fully formed. So thank you for doing that, and I am very much looking forward to seeing those plans when
And
it
it was great working with the junior high where they listened to this is how we progress from kindergarten through 5th grade, but then we also learned, wow, what does it look like when you go into junior high, because it's a totally different world from ours.
So cool.
So we really learned a lot from each other and helped through helped create this literacy framework to what's the word that I'm looking for, to grab all of that information and put it down, but in a way that will be very teacher friendly. And
We actually rolled it out all to the junior high English language arts teachers just last week, and it went very, very well.
Yeah, and for elementary, it'll be a little slower since we teach every subject. We'll be taking it one step at a time.
Well, I had the privilege of seeing at a previous Teaching and Learning Committee meeting the presentation for the math framework last year or prior to COVID, and it was pretty spectacular. So I am definitely looking forward to that one. Thank you.
Mr. Gateway, I feel like we cut you off before. Were there more questions? Okay.
No, you answered it. Okay. You answered it, but it's just something that I knew we would have to think about 2 years from now, and so just
right.
Makes sense.
Any last comments before we?
Thank you. This is such a great thing to see, having sat through the phone calls and the oh my goodness, I don't know if we can do this. To see this come to some kind of potential close and start to look toward recovery, it is a great thing to see. So thank you very much. I know that it's a relief for all of you as well. And I know how many meetings and how hard you guys have been working, so thank you very much.
Definitely, thank you. Yep. Item 8.1, approval of bills for payment. Can I get a motion for item 8.1?
I make a motion to authorize the payment of bills in the amount of $1,360,269.65 as presented.
Second.
Mrs. Croner,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson,
Aye.
Dr. Marino,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. 8.2, approval of building administrator contract. Can I get a motion to approve this?
I make a motion to approve the building administrator contract as presented.
Second.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Mrs. Croner,
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson,
Aye.
Dr. Marino.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Can I get a motion for the approval of the 8.3 district administrator contract?
I make a motion to approve the district administrator contract as presented.
Second.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton,
Aye.
Dr. Marino,
Aye.
Mrs. Croner,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. And can I get a motion for 8.4, approval of personnel report?
I make a motion to approve the personnel report as presented.
Second.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Dr. Marino,
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton,
Aye.
Mrs. Croner.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. 9.1, can I get a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
You gotta speak into the microphone.
Second.